Welcome to Beyond Six Figures, the podcast that helps business coaches to micro-niche, get noticed, and become fully booked. Learn from top industry leaders who've successfully taken their businesses and their lives beyond six figures. Get ready to level up your coaching business and make this world a better place, one business at a time. And now, here's your host, Ziv Raviv.
Welcome to Beyond Six Figures. Our guest today is Brian Margolis, founder of productivitygiant.com and creator of the Pillar System. Brian is the author of the Index Card Business Plan for Sales Pros and Entrepreneurs, a once environmental scientist turned business strategist whose simple, actionable approach has propelled numerous sales professionals into seven-figure earnings and has been licensed by Fortune 500 companies worldwide. Hello, Brian Margolis, the man and the system. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I think that your system is so smart and easy to understand that it's such a clarity tool. But before we go into geeking out on your ideas about productivity and how clarity of habits affect it, tell us a little bit about how did you get to become an advisor, a consultant, a coach, and got into business?
By accident. So I grew up wanting to be Jacques Cousteau. I think my undergrad's in marine science, graduates in fisheries and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I did for my first real career. I was a research scientist. And I, as a coach, would later call me. I guess I was just psychologically unemployable. And so I had started a business on the side and eventually left my career to take over that business full time, to make it full time. And like a lot of people, early on entrepreneur and a lot of successes and failures back and forth. And, I never really set out to coach or consult anyone. It was just that I always felt, for me, I always had this kind of this inferiority complex that I never went to business school. I was never trained in sales. I was, because this is 25 plus years ago now. It wasn't cool to be an entrepreneur back then. So I always felt like I didn't have the right training. And so I would just create these dumb little systems for myself and things like that. And I guess as I met more and more people and started having some successes, people would start just asking me for advice or questions or conversations. And I would tell them about this dumb little system I created for myself that, a lot of trial and error. I had to make all the mistakes first. And, this dumb little system and how I just ran my week from an index card and kept it super simple. And everyone was just like, I need to do that. I need to simplify things. That's genius. And I'm going, it's not genius. It's just simple. And I started realizing, oh my God, as an entrepreneur, there's a market for this, right? There's a market for taking successful people and helping them get clarity and really simplifying how they operate.
And your ability to simplify things is actually something that you saw people respond to it. People actually resonate with it and it actually brings them results. So how did that become something that actually people nowadays, they license the system and they work with you personally?
Yeah. So as I started helping more and more people, and it wasn't like a full-time thing, I realized more and more the potential. Because sometimes when you're good at something, when you're naturally good at something, you don't think it's that valuable to the marketplace. And so I never understood why people couldn't do it themselves, right? We all kind of think differently. And so I started working with people and then, word of mouth spread. And all of a sudden I'm working with companies and I'm training their sales teams on how to simplify their weeks and how to have a simpler strategy. And then those companies wanted to bring it through their whole company, some of these big companies. And so I would license it and kind of do a train the trainers model because it's not rocket science. I always joke that the pillar system is not the best strategy in the world, but it's the best strategy you'll actually do. And so since it's the best one you'll actually do, that makes it pretty powerful.
And sometimes it's the little changes that get you back on track, which is like getting people back on track is something that also is one of your focus points and programs. So can you share with us a few examples of results that people shared with you that they had with your system?
Well, I mean, yeah, you said something in the introduction. I mean, I've had a lot of people become seven-figure earners, a lot of solopreneurs, salespeople, things like that. Again, I wasn't telling them how to do their business. I wasn't training them on their business. I was just helping them create the weekly plan so that they could focus on the things that got them the biggest ROI and really distilled it down. I mean, we have stories of doubling people's income in 2 years and stuff like that's crazy when you think about it, but it's really not when you think about how much wasted effort we all are guilty of when we run a reactive business. And I think that's really the key is I'm trying to help people move from a reactive business to an intentional business, right? Hence my t-shirt.
Intentional.
To me, it's about being like, I describe a reactive business as it's like a heater outside, right? It's perfectly good heat that's being pumped out. It's just that most of it's dissipating. Most of it's being wasted. And that's what happens when talented people aren't intentional. They're talented, they're skilled, but they don't have an actual strategy, right? They don't have a predetermined place to focus their skills, their work ethic to get the biggest ROI. And so we help them create that weekly strategy, that list of weekly pillars, make sure it's the right ones.
And in your podcast, Simplify Your Strategy, Magnify Your Results podcast, actually meet with people and help them define their pillar weekly activities. And tell me a little bit about that process of taking someone and helping them get to that clarity so fast.
Yeah, I mean, so what I do, calling it a podcast is probably too nice. I basically just have, I want people to see it in action, right? Before they decide to do it or hire me or anything like that. And so what I do in real time is I take people through the system to take their mess and turn it into that kind of clear weekly strategy so people can realize it's very doable. There is a process, and the process to go from that reactive, overwhelming business down to your weekly pillars, right? It's like a 5-step process. The end result, though, and this is what I want people to understand is, let's say you wind up with 7 pillars, 7 weekly pillars. Everyone's different. The idea is very simple. These 7 pillars are in your control. In other words, they're not goals. Goals are how we start, but pillars are not goals. These are 7 things that they control whether they get done by Friday or not. And the idea is real simple. They know if they execute on those things on Friday, they had a great week, regardless of that week's results, right? And that's important because I think for salespeople and entrepreneurs, our results are often lag indicators. And so sometimes you can do all the right things one week and not much happens. You can also go away for 3 days, come back on Thursday, start checking your email, and all of a sudden you have 2 new clients or 14 more sales. And it's not that you did the wrong things. It's just that those things are lag indicators. So I love when my clients have what we call the Friday night feeling, right? They know on Friday night, they had a good week, right? They did the right things. They feel confident in that.
In a way, it's all about trusting the process with your pillars, even if there will be lag results. What do you do with your clients if they didn't actually do the pillars? That could be like very frustrating. We all get busy and we all sometimes get overwhelmed, and sometimes we choose pillars that maybe are very much connected to our goals, but they still are something that we are struggling with. So how do you overcome a situation like that?
So the pillar system has 2 parts, right? The first part is figuring out what the right pillars are. right? Creating the weekly strategy. And sometimes people, they see how simple it looks in the end result, and they think the simplicity is the power, but it's really that, no, those, because they went through this process, those are actually the 6 right things or whatever number they have. So step 1 is figuring out what the right things are that are in their control. So they know beyond a shadow of a doubt, as long as they execute on these 6 things every week, it's just a matter of time and pressure. The second part of the pillar system is, okay, great. Now that we know what these 6 or 7 or whatever things are, how in the world do you hit those things every week consistently while still dealing with the day-to-day of your business, both the unexpected, the expected, the reactiveness? And so the second part, what we call the ideal week, okay, is basically, how do you structure your days? How do you structure your week? And this third one's very important. What rules do you operate by? And what tools do you use so that you'll hit your pillars consistently, right? That's a whole second part, is now that we know what the right things are, how do we operate in a way so those things get done?
What are some examples of those rules?
So a rule might be an if, like, for example, we might put in place an if-then rule. So we have this thing called pro time. Okay. And pro time, it stands for proactive significant, but it works perfectly because it separates the pros from the amateurs, right? What pro time is that's that time, usually at the beginning of the day. Some people do it every day. Some people have it staggered, but let's say it's 7 to 11 Mondays and Tuesdays or something like that, right? It's that time at the beginning of a day where they work on their business, not in their business, right? Where they're doing their pillars, right? They're working on, they're not reacting, they're not scheduling meetings during that time. Well, one of the temptations that happens, depending on your business or what you're selling, is that you'll have pro time. We call it molding your calendar. Your pro time is molded out for essentially ever until you change it, right? And you schedule meetings and things like that around that. Well, the temptation obviously comes in sometimes to put things in that pro time because someone says, oh, can you do Tuesday at 9:30? And you want to go, sure, I could do that, right? So when there truly is an exception, and there truly is an exception, and you have to give up your pro time, we put in an if-then rule. If I have to give up 2 hours of my pro time, and then fill in how you want to do the rule. I add 2 hours to Wednesday, or I do 2 longer hours that day, or whatever it happens to be. So that way people don't feel like it's so rigid, it's not reasonable. But that would be like a rule that we would put in place, right?
What are some of your pillars, if you don't mind sharing?
So get my index, get my index
Yes,
card here.
I want to see your index.
So I'll give you a couple of them, but I'll give you one of mine is called Excel Follow. Okay. So I think for a lot of us in our businesses, follow up is critical, right? And so every time I have an opportunity, and an opportunity to me is strictly defined as there's a next step, and I believe that person's going to take the next step, whether it's talking to a partner or reading over information or whatever it is. If I believe they're going to do that, they go into that Excel follow document. And every week I literally go down that document line by line, and anyone who needs that next poke, touch, whatever gets it. So that's my follow-up. That's nothing slips through the cracks for me. And that can be follow up on anything. So that's more of like a business actionable pillar, right? I also have one called 30 minutes optimized Brian. So I give myself the emotional permission that for 30 minutes a week, I can do things to make me better and not feel guilty about it, right? That can be researching health stuff for a better workout. It could be looking for a better computer because mine's slowing down and I keep keeping it together with duct tape and doing workarounds. And it's like, you know what? No, that's part of optimizing me. So I give myself that permission. And then a big one that I'm a fan of is, and don't have to necessarily go into mine for this, but are what we call learning or effectiveness pillars. And that's one of the types of pillars because I think a lot of people, they think of getting better at something or learning as something you do after work or when you have extra time. And the way I look at it is, no, getting better is actually part of work. Like that is work. The qualifier is that it's what you choose, meaning I think a lot of us, especially if we're into podcasts and books and we go down the YouTube rabbit hole and all of a sudden we see Hormozy videos. So we watch that, or we see the algorithm, we watch that and we think we're learning and getting better. There's a lot of randomness there. And so what a learning pillar is you simply ask the question, if I can add 5 points in any skill. So if I'm a 0, I'm a 5. If I'm a 5, I become a 10. Which skill will give me the biggest ROI, right? And then that becomes one of the learning pillars because it seems so funny, but choosing what to learn is actually the most important part of learning when it comes to business, not just learning randomly. So if I was to ask you, Ziv, right, I won't put you on the spot too much here, but for you personally, if you could improve in any one skill, I could magically add 5 points to that skill. Okay. Which one would have the biggest impact on your bottom line or your goal or whatever it is you're trying to achieve? Right. And it's not always an easy question to answer.
It's not because a few things already crossed my mind. Like I started to look at shiny objects in my brain, like, ooh, I want to be better as a manager and be more organized with processes and systems. Right.
But which one's as Alex would say, which one's the constraint, right? Like if you can get better at one thing, if we can add 5 points, which one has the biggest impact? And then once you figure out what that is, it doesn't mean there's not other things you can't get better at. You can have 2 effectiveness or learning pillars, but it's taking the time to figure out what that is and then spending, let's say it's called 60 minutes minimum every week working on that, learning about that, whatever. That kind of focus is how you move forward, not just letting the algorithm tell you what to watch.
I love it. Can you tell us a little bit about your Get on Track, Stay on Track program? Who is the type of people that benefit from it, and what's that all about? Yeah.
So remember we said the pillar system has 2 kind of parts to it, right? The first part is figuring out what your pillars are, the right lead indicators, the right things that you control. That's the get on track, right? We got to build your track. Okay. The stay on track. So that's the first part of the program. That's for people who need my help creating their weekly strategy, their pillars. The stay on track part is that second part. It's people who want help and be part of a program to hit your pillars consistently, right? To kind of the second half of the book or the second half of it. So a lot of people do both, right? Get on track will come with stay on track. Other people kind of already know what their weekly strategy is. Maybe they've done it themselves or they've worked with me before. And so they're part of our more stay on track program. We have this thing called a CAP, a custom accountability program, where we ask you to take all these, what we call CAP strategies, and choose the 2 or 3 that work for you and with your brain. And then we use those to make sure you're hitting your pillars consistently. But that's basically the program. Yep.
How do people learn about you and your programs? How do they find you?
Here's what's funny. I'm not a great marketer. I've been lucky. I've done very well through word of mouth, people telling people. You know, I post on LinkedIn. I do things like that. A lot of people learn about me through companies, but if somebody listening to this wants to learn more, I just tell them, just go to the website, productivitygiant.com, or go on Amazon, grab a copy of the book, The Index Card Business Plan. And my favorite clients, is I think with a lot of coaches, consultants, are those who kind of come to you and they're like, yeah, I'm ready, right? They're not there to be convinced. They're just there to see if this is worth their time, if it's what they think it is. And so I'm a big fan of letting them educate themselves first if they choose.
How did you get into working with people that got into Shark Tank?
That was, so I told you I've had a number of businesses over the years. And one little venture we were doing, me and a partner, we were actually investing in products and getting things on shelves. And there's some stories there where we got some things into Walmart and different things. But we would invest with, and this was mostly on his end, he owned all the media, but we would invest in products and companies instead of with cash. We would do it with media time, with placements that we had, with airtime, radio time, TV time, different things. And so I used to vet the products. I used to go to shows. I used to make the deals. And a lot of the people that were on Shark Tank that didn't wind up getting deals, which is more than you think, even the ones who claim they got, it looks like on the show they got a deal. You know, the ones we believed in that we thought we could help, we used to reach out to them and we would run ads for them. Or back, and this is over 10 years ago now. So there was a little more oomph to the media we were using. But so, and I got to know a lot of them through that. I got some great stories that I can tell around the campfire, so to speak. I wouldn't say on the air, but, and then I wind up helping them with whatever.
Give me the 1 minute elevator pitch, if you don't mind, about the wholesalers part of your business. You advise?
So sometimes things just happen. There's a industry out there called financial wholesaling. You know, I think they're salespeople, but they're like, I call them the drug reps of the financial industry. What they do is they call on financial advisors, and their job is to, you know, work with them, influence them to write their product over the competitor's product. So they're salespeople. They're called wholesalers in that world, investment wholesalers, financial wholesalers. And what happened was I started working with a few of them that I knew personally, and we absolutely were crushing it. They were just, their business was just growing. So their company started asking, like, what are you doing? And some of them kept it secret. Some of them would tell, because we were doing some interesting things. And it was just one of those things that it's a small industry. Everyone it's not really small, but everyone kind of knows everyone in that industry. So I was very lucky in that way that the results we were getting kind of spread word of mouth as people would change companies and things like that. So it's kind of like a vertical I work in with the pillar system and some other things I help them with. But again, it's just we all know in business sometimes is there's a little bit of luck involved, and doing a good job in an industry that has a lot of word of mouth and people know each other. I'll take that any day over trying to market cold.
So you micro-niched accidentally and found your people that gets results from you.
Yeah.
And that's really a great story.
But I've worked with everything from lawyers to music producers to entrepreneurs to, I always say, if you are results-based, if you get compensated or judged on results, then you're running a business and you should have a weekly strategy, right? And, you know, if being really simple and less overwhelmed is appealing to you, then I recommend taking a look at the book or checking out my stuff.
And I join your recommendation. Guys, this is like a well-kept secret of productivity. You should head over to productivitygiant.com and learn more about what Brian Margolis is doing. We'll put the links on the show notes as well, in case someone is driving right now. Brian, thank you so much for helping us with our clarity and helping our listeners with inspiration for tools that are just very simple and easy to understand, but are also valuable in when you implement them.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me, Ziv.
And thank you guys for listening for another episode of Beyond Six Figures.
Thanks for listening to Beyond Six Figures. Check out the extended show notes that include bonus material, practical tips, and exclusive resources on our website, zivraviv.com. Until next time, keep dreaming big and pushing your business and your life beyond six figures.